Hi there, and welcome to Tucktuk's Trinkets and Terrain. Where I live, we get quite a bit of snow during the winter, and while trudging outside walking the dog, I realized that I have no icy or snow terrain to play on. So after getting back inside, I sat down, worked with some paint schemes, tried to create a snow flocking that I had materials for and was easy to make, and I settled on what I think is a really good looking setup. It's a bit more fantastical than realistic looking. That's my personal preference, so I really like it. After making a few bits and bobs for some terrain, a really basic board, I then set about making an appropriate monster that some unfortunate adventurers might stumble upon while trudging through the ice and the snow. So, thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoy.
Alright, so this project's going to be actually a couple smaller ones put together. To start off with, I'm going to be making some snow piles, snow drifts, something along those lines. Starting off with some scrap foam that I'm just going to trim down using my blade here into roughly boulder shapes. And then I also made a few sort of corner pieces where maybe snow has piled up somewhere. So just get a rough shape out, and then after cleaning everything up, it's kind of what I'm left with, just some generic sort of shapes. After that, I grabbed some sandpaper. This is, I think, 100 grit, so fairly rough, but the intention here is just to smooth down the harder edges to get a more round shape. Alright, so the next little project is sort of like ice columns or ice spikes, something along those lines. This is a 4x1 piece of foam. I just trimmed off the edges and then I sort of shape it into sort of a spike shape. And then I take a flame here, being very careful, and I sort of just, again, round off the edges. Using the flame fairly quickly, and I'm just targeting the hard corners. And then I'm left with sort of a crystal shape. Alright, so next I started to work on my snowman monster using some Crayola dry clay. This acts very similar to traditional clay, but you don't have to fire it or put it in the oven or anything. So I got two balls, one for the body, one for the head, and then I just sort of roughed in a mouth shape here. I'm not really that familiar with sculpting, so this was pretty basic, but in the end it did turn out pretty cool. After the mouth was shaped, I wanted a big old tongue coming out of it, so I flattened a piece of clay, split it, and stuck it in there. So after that, I wanted this to look creepy in a way, so I wanted sort of unnatural looking limbs. Using the old DM Scotty method, I grabbed some barbecue skewers and broke them into sort of leg shapes, thinking spider-like. So I made 4 of those. After that, I realized that I forgot to put eyes on my snowman head here. Just thinking about a traditional snowman with like button eyes, I put on these big balls, and they were a little too goofy looking, so I did add some eyelids, both top and bottom, but keeping their sort of bulbous shape. I then made a quick little nose with just a toothpick, stuck that in just to make sure it was going to look okay. And then after that, I got back to the legs, using some hot glue to reinforce the parts where they were broken and then give them some texture as well to hopefully make them look more like branches, like traditional snowman limbs would be. I also made some arms using the same method. Again, just a barbecue stick broken up, and then the fingers are little toothpicks. And here's everything all done. After that, I moved on to the teeth for the snowman's mouth. These are just toothpick ends that I glued on. I didn't want too many because the mouth is kind of small, but it does look fairly intimidating in my opinion once it's all in there. And then I just used the hot glue to reinforce all the toothpicks and make sort of a gum line. This does look fairly goofy right now, but after it's all painted up, it looks a lot more cohesive altogether. I then glued on the legs, glued on the arms. You can see that sort of spider-like shape that I was going for. So after that, I got to work on the base. This is just a piece of chipboard with a piece of foam board glued on top, and then I beveled the edges. So my idea here was that this snowman is so heavy that its legs can't support it completely, so it has to drag itself through the snow. So I placed the snowman down and sort of marked out where I wanted the drag trail to be. And then I also marked where the legs were going to go, because it was a little off balance. I knew that I was going to need to add something for the legs to actually connect with the ground. And I just used some hot glue to sort of form the rough shape of the drag trail, and then raise up the areas where their feet were going to touch. So here's everything that we're going to be painting with our ice and snow paint. Just some generic dungeon tiles that I made. They're 3x3, and then as well as our ice columns and our little snow piles. After everything got a base coat, I started to work on my snow painting method. So this is a metallic blue. This is going to be the essentially a second base coat. And the black is going to darken it up, but it does make a nice deep blue sort of shine underneath the next steps. After this is the first dry brush, using these two colors, a light blue and then a pearl white. It's a 50-50 mix. This gives it a sort of secondary shine, different color underneath the final step. This is a fairly light dry brush. I don't go too crazy with this because the last step is a pretty heavy dry brush. You can see here that the color doesn't necessarily change adding the white, but it does give a nice shine to the light blue. And I realize this isn't super realistic. That's more fantasy in nature, like I said at the beginning of the video, but I do like how it ends up looking after everything. Get all those dry brushed with that color. And then the very last step is just a pure white, but this is a pretty heavy dry brush. It almost makes it completely white, letting the first two colors just sort of peek through. So yeah, dry brush all the surfaces of all of my pieces here. So once that was all done, I painted up the snowman's arms and legs just a dark brown, and then I painted the nose a dark orange, going along with the sort of traditional snowman theme of a carrot for a nose. And this tongue kind of gets lost here with it being white, so I took that metallic blue and painted over the entire tongue. And then I tried my hand at a wet blend for the tips of the tongue, just from white to that metallic blue. It goes okay. I'm not the best painter, but it does sort of get the effect across that I was going for. The tongue was pretty plain with just the metallic blue, and it didn't have a lot of texture, so this adds just a little bit of variety. And then once that was all done, I did paint the eyes black, and then I dry brushed the stick limbs with just a tan, just to give it some variety. So here is my formula for snow. It's just white glue. This says school glue, but it is just a straight white glue. I just use the bottle here. And then baking soda, and then I like to use a tiny bit of this ultra fine glitter. And then I mix all that together. You can see my first attempt here, the snow is pretty liquidy. So I ended up mixing more baking soda in to thicken it up, and then I just applied that all over the base here. I used this popsicle stick to spread out the snow flocking here, using it to not only attach the snowman to the base itself, but then also make some texture. trying to really focus on that drag mark, make it thinner than the rest, and then build up the snow in front of it as the snowman is sort of pushing the snow along. But you can see here I'm trying to give it some texture with my finger here after it had dried a little bit. The flocking still ended up being too runny. You can see here it ran off quite a bit from my snow pile rock things here, and then the snowman base didn't hold any of the texture that I tried to put into it. It also didn't hold any of the snow at the front of the snowman here where it would be bunching up, unfortunately. I ended up mixing a second batch, this time a lot thicker, and I had also used a smaller applicator tool here instead of the popsicle stick. I'm using a barbecue skewer, and I really focused on where the snow would be bunching up in front of the snowman to give it a little, at least a little bit more realism. And then I was kind of afraid that the snowman was gonna not stick as well, so I did apply more snow to the feet here. And here are our final products. The dungeon tiles here with the snow painting, our columns, and our sort of rock piles with the snow on them. You can see that the glitter adds just a tiny bit of shine. And then our snowman. I think he ended up menacing enough. If you did like this video, please like and subscribe. I post dungeon craft videos every other week. I have an Instagram that you can check out. The link for that is in the description. I post work in progress pictures, other projects that I'm not necessarily recording, as well as the occasional cute dog video. But more than anything, thank you so much for stopping by. Hope to see you again next time.